Tonight, private hospitals join the coronavirus fight, opening up 34,000 extra beds. A Brisbane brothel slapped with the first fines for breaching the new coronavirus lockdown rules. The race to retool Australian companies repurposing their products to make critical medical supplies, and using the power of music to lift spirits. Good evening, Matt Wordsworth with ABC News. The financial cost of trying to protect vital parts of the economy is soaring. On top of yesterday's record-busting wage subsidy package, private hospitals are being handed more than $1 billion to effectively merge with the public health system. And the government is also weighing up a bid for $1 billion bailout for Virgin Australia. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
An economy in hibernation, airports spookily quiet, and with business drying up, Virgin Australia's come knocking. It wants a $1.5 billion bailout.
We do support a viable, sustainable aviation sector.
The prospect of taxpayers becoming owners of private companies doesn't stop at aviation.
Identify those strategic businesses and be ready to temporarily nationalise, right? Everything from airlines, airports, childcare, aged care, regional bus lines.
It's already happening, in effect, in the health sector.
They are available as an extension now of the public hospital system in Australia.
Tens of thousands of beds, 100,000 staff and hundreds of ventilators in private hospitals will be marshalled for Medicare. Amid fears public hospitals will come up short when the virus peaks. In return, they get more than $1 billion and a promise to protect them against financial collapse.
We will be guaranteeing the viability, along with the states, of all 657 private hospitals in Australia.
Saving businesses more and more a matter of government focus.
We lost something like 1 million jobs last week. This new announcement has probably brought back comfortably more than half of that.
The $1,500 a fortnight JobKeeper payment for full-time, part-time and casual staff is a jaw-dropping $130 billion third instalment in the federal economic rescue. Big numbers tend to boggle, so here's a comparison. The Rudd government's two stimulus packages during the global financial crisis were worth $52 billion combined, or about 4.5% of the economy. So far, the government has spent a shade under $200 billion in direct assistance, or about 10% of GDP. What that means for the budget's bottom line is small surpluses expected this year and next are washed away in a sea of red.
More will be needed and more will be done.
Old economic rules and ideologies have been extinguished by this pandemic, so the hand of government will be back in businesses that haven't felt it for decades. For some, it might be for good, or as long as the debt burden lingers from all these rescues. And that'll be a very long time. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
More than 270,000 businesses have already registered for the government's massive wage subsidy package. Companies large and small say it'll allow them to retain staff that would otherwise have to join the long queues at Centrelink. Andrew Robertson reports.
It's empty workplaces like this that prompted the biggest government stimulus package in Australia's history. But Brisbane restaurant owner Ibrahim Haddad says while the $1,500 a fortnight towards the cost of each staff member is welcome, it's misguided.
They're looking at it from a taxation and a job employment. They're not looking from a point of view of operator and business owner.
With 95% of his revenue gone and nearly all his staff laid off, Ibrahim Haddad doesn't think he'll be able to rehire anyone for a long time.
Even if we employ people, who's going to come to the restaurant? It does not make any sense for us to do that.
Like all of the estimated 1 million Australians who've been thrown out of work in the past few weeks, product designer Corey de Jong is hoping he'll get his job back. For now, it's his bank that's helping him survive.
Luckily, I was able to freeze my mortgage for 3 months, which is a huge relief because obviously it's one of the big payments that comes out of my wage.
Hardware manufacturer Auchan Long Group has been saved so far by a large pipeline of construction work. Chief Executive Nigel Long says JobKeeper will help when that work inevitably dries up.
If we do get to that point where we really need to assess what does the business look like going forward, then it gives us some certainty to start to model around.
In particular, Nigel Long thinks JobKeeper will stop coronavirus doing long-term damage by allowing him to hang on to his best staff.
It would be tragic if you lose that group of young people coming through the business that you've invested that training and education into.
Whatever the merits of the JobKeeper package, the first payments won't start till May, which is over a month away. And they'll only last 6 months, which means if the economy is still being smashed in November, the government may have to tip in some more. Andrew Robertson, ABC News.
Hundreds of extra law enforcement officials will be called on to help the state government with its mammoth contact tracing efforts. The extra force will bolster health resources to track down and check on the thousands of Queenslanders who've been placed under an isolation or quarantine order. Lexi Hamilton-Smith has more.
Welcome home. Under police and military escort, these overseas travellers who flew into Brisbane this morning are taken straight into quarantine. They're among 174 passengers who are being forced to wait it out in hotels for 2 weeks.
In those hotels, the people will be kept quarantined from each other.
So far, more than 40,000 Queenslanders have been placed under an isolation or quarantine order. Hundreds of law enforcement and government workers will now be enlisted to ensure those orders are followed. A powerful task force that will also track down thousands of others who may have unwittingly been in touch with a coronavirus sufferer.
This is really important. We need to be throwing everything that we have at this.
These are not voluntary orders. They are enforceable at law and they will be enforced.
So too, strict social distancing laws. This unlicensed brothel on Brisbane's north side, the first to be fined. Its 37-year-old owner hit with more than $6,000 for failing to comply with public health directives. A 25-year-old worker also fined more than $1,300. The pair is due to also appear in court in June for allegedly providing prostitution services.
It's obviously alleged on this instance that the massage services were offered in contravention to that directive.
The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Queensland has now climbed to 743, up 55 on yesterday. In far north Queensland, a health alert issued after 3 people with coronavirus attended a wrestling competition at a community centre in Cairns on March 14. Anyone who went along and is feeling unwell is urged to seek medical advice.
As you can see, this exercise of identifying where every positive case has been and who they might have come into contact with is very, very substantial.
The government hasn't ruled out closing Queensland beaches if social distancing rules aren't followed. Waterways also will be closely monitored.
People are still fishing in boats and leaving and gathering in groups and going fishing, so we'll be paying attention to that.
Across the city, the streets are pretty quiet, and those who are out seem to be mostly adhering to the strict 2-person rule. But authorities say they need at least 7 to 14 days to assess whether these measures are having an impact on the rate of infection. 65 Queenslanders are currently battling the virus in hospital. 7 are in intensive care and 5 are being ventilated as the state holds its breath and waits for what's to come. Lexi Hamilton-Smith, ABC News.
The government has been pointing to early signs that Australia is flattening the curve, raising hopes over the country's coronavirus strategy. But these signs should also be taken with caution. A week ago, the growth in new cases was 25 to 30%. Over the past 3 days, it's dropped from 15 on Saturday to 8% the last 2 days, and now just 7% today. Health Minister Greg Hunt says that's thanks to strict quarantine requirements and social distancing rules.
This progress is early, it's significant, but now with these additional rules around gatherings and movement, we are going the next step to help reduce again the level of infection and to support our containment.
Up until now, the vast majority of tests have been done on people returning from overseas. And as you can see here, overseas arrivals have accounted for more than 60% of people who've tested positive. With those arrivals now slowing to a trickle, you would expect the number of cases to also drop. That's the goal in locking our borders. But that means community transmission becomes a bigger focus. It's made up about a quarter of cases. And worryingly, some people aren't sure who they contracted the virus from. That means it could be spreading through the community, particularly from people who are asymptomatic. In fact, one study by Columbia University of people in China suggested 86% of those who had the disease didn't show symptoms or even know they had it. It's for these reasons that once again everyone is being asked to stay at home and practice social distancing. A pop-up coronavirus testing clinic will be set up on Sydney's Bondi Beach after a cluster of cases there was linked to backpackers. The Bondi area has recorded 140 cases, the biggest geographical cluster in New South Wales. Health authorities have identified the high number of backpackers in the area as the source, and there's concern about how far the virus may have spread before restrictions on social gatherings came into force.
We do know that there is a potential risk that other members of the community may have come in contact with infected backpackers, and as for prudency, we want to increase testing.
Testing criteria will be relaxed so that anyone with symptoms in the area will be eligible for a test. There is a global shortage of some key medical supplies, making it difficult and dangerous for doctors and nurses to safely treat potentially infectious patients. But Australian companies have joined the race to retool and repurpose their products to help the fight.
No chocolate or chips. These vending machines are stocked with medical masks. Just one way Australian hospitals are trying to keep track of potentially life-saving protective equipment.
In some hospitals, we've seen 6 months' worth of usage in 1 week. What we're trying to do is to have an effective system of distribution with this finite resource at this critical time.
More masks are being made. Adelaide company Detmold swapping food packaging for PPE to add $145 million to state and federal stockpiles.
For the first month, we'll probably be making around 5 million masks, but from June onwards, we're looking at making 20 to 25 million masks a month.
In Canberra, they're making the masks from scratch, employing 3D printers.
We're building soil moisture sensors for Africa. 3D printing is our bread and butter, so it's straightforward to convert it to doing other things.
Even the motor racing industry has joined the PPE race. Australian racing team Erebus is developing Perspex boxes that can be placed over a patient's bed.
It's looking pretty positive, and we're not trying to save the world, we're just trying to have some options.
In the US, Ford is making ventilators, while in the UK, Mercedes Formula One has teamed up with London University to trial a new breathing assistance machine, a device somewhere between an oxygen mask and a ventilator.
I sincerely think it may actually save many lives by preventing patients from needing to go onto a ventilator and again saving that vital resource for the very, very severely ill.
Corporate cooperation boosting life-saving resources. Isabel Damon, ABC News, Adelaide.
Fitness Australia estimates around 20,000 people in the exercise industry have lost their jobs during the coronavirus shutdown. The extra restrictions have made it even tougher, but gyms and personal trainers are finding innovative ways to try to stay viable.
John McNaughton was running small group classes in the park to keep his personal training business going during the coronavirus shutdown.
And back up we come.
But the latest social distancing restrictions have put an end to that. Now all he can offer is one-on-one sessions.
Yeah, look, it's going to be tough on the industry, and I think a bunch of trainers are going to struggle to keep an income.
Gyms are resorting to hiring out their equipment to clients.
Lots of them have taken us up on the offer and almost cleaned us out, which is great because we know it's out there, it's being used.
Members are trying to remain positive by posting photos and videos of their home workouts. New fitness apps that work much in the same way as dating apps are helping people connect with their desired personal trainer online.
I'm currently training people in Singapore, currently training people in New Zealand via the Wanna Train app.
Hi, love. You ready to start your Pilates today? I am.
This Pilates studio is running classes through online video conference calls.
In terms of interacting with the clients, it's been great because I can unmute them and we can have conversation over there, we can have a bit of a giggle about things.
Every day, this gym records a workout for its clients.
Hey guys, welcome back to Torian Land. I think mainly we just wanted to give our members a good product, like something that wasn't just reactionary.
It's a time-consuming process.
It's the editing. And I'm very fortunate that I don't have that job.
Fitness Australia says it's troubled by reports some owners have been threatened with fines for privately using their gyms to create workout videos. It wants a common sense approach from authorities.
And at this time, it's absolutely critical for people's physical and mental well-being that they can keep exercising in their homes.
I think one-on-one sessions are super important to keep PTs in business as well as keep everyone still fit and healthy.
The fitness industry doing its best to hang on. Michael Rennie, ABC News.
Well, the halls of State Parliament may be empty at the moment, but there is still business going on. The Parliamentary Health Committee has finished its review of voluntary assisted dying and recommended it be allowed in Queensland. For more, we're joined by State political reporter Alison Horn. Al, how significant is this?
Matt, it is quite significant. This is the Parliament's own committee that was tasked with investigating if voluntary assisted dying laws should be legal in Queensland. It's been going through this process for about a year and the deadline for the decision was today. And as you mentioned, it has recommended the government introduce this legislation. Now, what it's recommended is it would cover terminally ill people only for those over 18 and residents of Queensland. And from a medical perspective, doctors would be able to object on conscientious grounds.
And Al, with Parliament on hold, when is this likely to happen?
Yeah, good question. The pressure is now on the government to introduce these laws, to take the recommendation of its own committee, but there's no timeline on when that will happen. Advocates say that there is some urgency in pushing this through because there's fears that if it doesn't happen by the state election, which is due to be held in October, there could be a change of government, and it's highly unlikely the LNP would pursue this agenda. Now, as we know, Matt, though, it is strange times. We even don't have a schedule for the normal sitting of Parliament to resume, so there's no time frame on when this legislation could happen.
All right, Al, thank you. Alison Horn, our state political reporter there. A man shot dead by police in far north Queensland on Sunday has been identified as a former member of the Australian Defence Force. Chris Allen Vignes was killed standing waist deep in a creek north of Cairns after a 12-hour standoff with police. Earlier that day, he allegedly broke into a telecommunications building, rammed multiple police vehicles and drove his car into a 26-year-old officer, injuring him. Armed with a high-powered rifle, the former soldier threatened police, who returned fire, killing him. The ADF says it's aware of the incident but won't provide details about Mr Vignes' service history for privacy reasons. Alongside Italy, Spain is one of the worst hit countries in the world. For 2 straight days, more than 800 people have died from coronavirus. And as the total death toll approaches 8,000, the residents of the capital, Madrid, have paused for a moment's silence. Europe correspondent Samantha Hawley reports.
The flags are lowered to half-mast to honour the dead. Madrid's once bustling city squares are eerily quiet. Spain has been in lockdown for over 2 weeks, but that's been tightened further, with only essential workers allowed out of their homes.
Feeling better this week?
Yes, I've stopped crying.
Australians Natalia Lang and Mandy Keillor have called Spain home for 14 years. Now, life is very different.
It's frightening on every level, whether it be the people who are ill and the people who are losing their families.
Spain is following Italy on a deadly path. Now it too has surpassed China with 88,000 cases of COVID-19. The death toll rising to more than 7,700.
It's not a situation like that you can talk to anyone and someone give you advice on how to handle it. It's just a matter of we're all looking at each other going, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
funeral homes can barely keep up with demand.
We are multiplying by 6 the number of normal services we perform in that area.
But the nation's health officials say it's not all bad news.
The increase in cases was about 20%, and since social distancing measures began, it's 12%.
With the toll climbing around the world, France and the US have reached an unwanted milestone, recording more than 3,000 deaths. Cheering continues from windows across Europe for the doctors and nurses who've become heroes. 12,000 healthcare workers in Spain are now ill with the virus, but they're not being taken for granted. Samantha Hawley, ABC News.
COVID-19 is taking hold in Australia's Pacific neighbours, where it's feared the impact could be disastrous. Health systems there are already struggling, even without the burden of a pandemic. Natalie Whiting reports.
This tropical paradise has been declared a major disaster.
I think we're past the point of panicking. There's still some fear in the air, of course.
The US territory of Guam has recorded 58 cases of COVID-19, almost half of all of those in the Pacific Island region. And there have been dire warnings about the health system reaching critical care breakpoint.
I think time over the next 10 days is critical. I think this is going to tell whether or not our hospital will be flooded with more sick people that's coming in.
There's a shortage of personal protective equipment, but that's something local volunteers are helping with.
So we're focusing more on sewn cloth face masks and then 3D printed face shields.
A US Navy aircraft carrier has also docked at the island after an outbreak at sea. The 5,000 personnel on board are being contained. So far, at least 36 have tested positive. More than 100 cases of coronavirus have been recorded across the Pacific. Several countries, including some that are yet to even record a case, are closing borders or declaring national emergencies. The preemptive action is vital for countries with weak health systems. Papua New Guinea has declared a 14-day state of emergency after one confirmed case. The Australian government has said it will reconfigure its aid to the region to ensure critical health systems continue to function and to help manage the economic fallout. The impact of global shutdowns on these developing economies will likely be severe. From Guam, there's still a message of hope.
So we can all work together, fight a common enemy, and we'll win.
Pacific Island nations will be hoping for a united front in that fight. Natalie Whiting, ABC News.
To finance now, here's Alan Kohler.
Share prices started the day with a rise of 3.7%, continuing yesterday's record-breaking lurch upwards of 6.6%. But from then on, it became a black run downhill as traders locked in their profits. And after a twitch right at the end, the index closed 1.6% lower. And there ended up being some sizable falls by banks, retailers and miners. Two stocks that held their gains were debt collector Credit Corp and shopping centre owner Scentre Group, which the market thinks will benefit from yesterday's $130 billion JobKeeper package from the government. Speaking of which, here's a chart of the federal budget deficit since Federation, including UBS's guess as to what it's likely to be next year, which is around $300 billion or 16% of GDP. And that's equivalent to what it was in the First World War and a bit more than half what it was in the Second World War. One thing that hasn't stopped rising yet is alcohol sales, perhaps understandable, even though according to this CBA credit card spending tracker, food sales have come off. And here's a chart of Google searches for the term how to buy stocks. Now, bear in mind that people who own stocks know the answer to that already, so this is about people who have never bought them. And they seem to be getting interested, which usually means it's not the bottom, but only the virus knows that. On commodity markets, the US oil price got very close to $20 a barrel, which it hasn't been near for about 20 years. But Wall Street had a strong session last night, and that spilled over to most Asian markets today, except Japan. And the Australian dollar strengthened slightly to 61.8 US cents. And that's finance.
Still to come this hour, one family's warning about how deadly coronavirus can be.
I then received a phone call from my mum saying my dad had collapsed and the ambulance was on its way.
We We never anticipated that we'd be sat here on his birthday talking to you. If it can happen to us, you know, it can happen to anyone.
Plus, thousands of Australians still stranded on cruise ships with nowhere to go. That's coming up.
To some late-breaking news, 2 Australian Border Force officers have tested positive to coronavirus. One of the officers is located in New South Wales and the other is here in Queensland. Well, NRL and AFL players could be paid by the taxpayer thanks to the federal government's new JobKeeper program. The coronavirus outbreak has put all professional sport on hold, but the ABC has confirmed athletes will be eligible for wage subsidies under the JobKeeper scheme, potentially saving clubs and governing bodies millions of dollars.
We're still working through that specifically. My understanding on the face of it that players will be entitled to that allowance, which is fantastic news.
Today, Rugby Australia stood down 75% of its staff and projected losses of $120 million if the remainder of the season is cancelled. Well, being stuck at home is pretty grim, right? But I love this next story. It's about a couple who are determined to lift people's spirits on the streets of Adelaide with the help of their humble combi and one giant speaker. I'll let reporter Claire Campbell take it from here.
Amidst the fear and loneliness, there's still hope and happiness shining bright.
It's a good opportunity for us to connect with them and show them there's still people out there. You know, we all react the same way to music. We all want to dance.
When business stalled for Keith and Leanne due to coronavirus restrictions, they put their combi into gear and hit the streets of Adelaide with a speaker. With just one mission, to drive up spirits in this otherwise anxious and isolating time. Every afternoon and night, the Kindness Combi cruises past health clinics where people are forced to wait outside. It also delivers tunes and smiles to people who are immune compromised and stuck inside.
It doesn't matter how cool you think you are, when the combi goes past with MC Hammer singing "You Can't Touch This," you gotta dance.
Such a simple act of kindness helping a community stay upbeat. Claire Campbell, ABC News, Adelaide.
Some great moves, right? Well, time for weather now with Ashley Stevenson.
Matt, before we head into April tomorrow, I want to firstly touch on new data relating to March. Back in 1970, Brisbane Airport's warmest March nights were about 22.6 degrees. In 2020, they're more like 24 degrees. If we look at the Gold Coast, in 1995, Coolangatta's hottest March days were about 30.2 degrees. Now they're about 2 degrees warmer on 32.2. To today's weather, we had thunderstorms fire up this afternoon about Noosa, with a couple of cells moving through towards Rainbow Beach. A gauge near Gympie has had 39 millimetres. Those have now mostly moved offshore. But a thunderstorm warning remains current for heavy rain and damaging winds to the west of Charleville. Temperature-wise, most of the state was close to average. By the weekend, we will get a cool change through western parts. Today, though, Longreach hit 37, Birdsville 38 and 29 for Mackay. A mostly fine day in Brisbane, though a chance of a shower this evening. The city topped 31. On the satellite, a broad trough is triggering widespread storms in southern WA, moving into South Australia and the Territory. An inland trough will remain in place, leading to the possibility of scattered showers and storms through most of Queensland's southern interior and in the far southwest. To the major centres, a shower or two for Sydney and 25, a possible late shower for Melbourne and 24, a cloudy day for Adelaide and 23, storms in Darwin and 34. Home to Queensland, the tropical low in the far north is likely to start moving away from Queensland. So by Thursday, we'll see a reduction of shower and storm activity for the peninsula and the Torres Strait. To forecast, mostly fine in the north, 30 in Townsville, 36 in Mount Isa. Inland showers near the border, Thargomindah heading for 32, otherwise looking partly cloudy, 31 in Roma. In the southeast, a shower or two for coastal parts, 27 for the Sunshine Coast. In Brisbane, a mostly fine day for the capital with a top of 29. On Moreton Bay, winds south to southeasterly reaching 20 knots, seas below a metre. Sunrise at 3 minutes to 6. And looking ahead, mostly fine for the remainder of the week. Showers are possible for the weekend, a top of 31 in Brisbane on Saturday and 32 in Ipswich. Matt.
Thanks, Ash. That's the news to the moment. Keep up to date on the website. Time now, though, for 7:30.